Hello everybody, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Beastman Wolfenheimsel in the step up spawn. A nice thing about Beastman Wolfenheimsel is, it kind of looks like my character. It's pretty neat. Not exactly, to be honest though, my favorite monster. He's definitely a really cool monster, including his animation for when he attacks and all that, but he's not on my favorite monster list. And then also a nice fact about this is this monster actually looks like a monster instead of some female that they like to throw out as a monster, which I don't really understand whatsoever. Honestly, they throw out a lot of human beings as monsters, or things that look literally like humans as monsters. It's sort of funny. Hades doesn't count, but every monster I've been seeing so far besides Wolfenheimsel can literally be counted as a person. And maybe Horus. Horus got wings, so I guess you could count Horus as a monster, I guess? I don't know, to be fairly honest. Maybe Odin, but I can't really, all these other, these are not monsters. These are people. Hey, team. Okay, we got a monster right here. Other than that, look at this. Almost every one of these are people. They're not monsters, so it's kind of funny. And on top of it, they throw a lot of females in here as well, which when I first started was really bothersome, because when I first started playing this, I'm like, okay, I'm only gonna go for monsters that look super cool to me and just roll with it, because that's how I'm going to roll, because I played a lot of games before, so I wasn't sure the system and what's so not during the time. And then I realized when I got to a certain point that I had to throw in female monsters and stuff like that, and I was really debating hard. For 3 days straight, I was like, no, I'm not doing it. That's how bad it was, because I wasn't fond of the female monster only type thing. They don't have only female monsters, but where A-Team's going, most of the monsters are just straight up female and they look human as possible. It's not monsters. The concept of monsters is to be monsters. And then we got a monster right here that actually looks like a monster, so I'm pretty happy about that. But anyways, moving on from there, let's actually talk about the ability briefly. I'm going to be talking about it as fast as possible, and without any complications. So this monster is a very split monster. It's got a player versus enemy and player versus player skills in it, and on top of it, some of these skills that it has are not really all too recommended whatsoever. Blind's not really recommended if you really want a nasty status alignment in player versus player, because this is a player versus player move right here, blind. You want to go for either paralyzation or confusion, because that's also going to affect healing clerics. Blind will not affect healing clerics. So if you have a cleric on the enemy team and you try this blind thing that you're trying with any other team that doesn't have a cleric, all he's got to do is area recovery, arc heal, whatever he has to do, and just like that, the blind's gone. Blind doesn't affect cleric whatsoever, so blind's not really recommended. Critical hit chance isn't recommended either. All it's doing, whenever you critical, all it's doing is increasing the ability power of the move by 50. Now this is a pretty huge buff, but on top of it, if it's not enough that it only increases the ability power by 50, all you gotta do is find stuff gear with the skills Fatal Testament, and just like that, that's critical hit. Each time you proc Fatal Testament, it counts as critical hit. So if it's not the fact that you're not just getting 50 ability power buff, you could also just find stuff with Fatal Testament. Fatal Testament literally is low-key a critical hit. That's what it is. They don't tell you it, but it's critical hit. That's what Fatal Testament is. So all you gotta do is find Fatal Testament gear, and you can find these in weapons and armor, so they're not uncommon whatsoever. They've been throwing out a lot more armors with Fatal Testament. As you can see, I just showed you 2 right here. So, and on top of it, I think they have 35s, 36s, if not somewhere between them. I'm not sure which one. They have Fatal Testament as well, so they keep going with Fatal Testament. They keep throwing more and more and more Fatal Testaments out there. They also have weapons that have Fatal Testaments as well, so Fatal Testament, there's abundant amount of Fatal Testaments out there. I'm not going to say you're going to get it easily, but it's not going to be the most difficult thing in the game whatsoever to get at all. So critical hit chance is dead. If you're looking for critical hit, just do so, add more proc rates, proc values. Just put in your main as a Fatal Testament. You're good to go. You ain't even got to worry about the critical hit chance. It's not even worth it, to be fairly honest. Just raw critical hit chance increase you're like, I'm telling you, you're better off with the Fatal Testament. So not even worth it, to be fairly honest. Critical damage is only increasing the ability power by 30. When you critical hit, it's going to count as 50. So you're going to have to go through a rate first, and then when you go through the rate of whether which is aka the critical hit, then you get the ability power buff of 30, when you could just pop a monster that increases the ability power instead of just doing this low-key ability power buff, which is pretty much what it is. But first you have to go through rates and all this stuff. With this one, you can just pop something like Bastard or Nihal. Let me show you right here. Nihal's got it. I have Nihal, but I only have it as an SSR. If it's somewhere down here. There it is. Increases the, where is it? It's somewhere here. I know it is. Ability power buff limit, ability power damage taken. Yeah, all that funky jazz. So they have them like in monsters already as like raw abilities. It's not worth this one whatsoever. I don't really recommend it whatsoever. So on top of like them being split, they don't really, he doesn't really have, like, all of his abilities are not useful 24/7. Now this damage reflection, damage reduction, and continuous healing can be useful in Super United offenses more of than really any player versus enemy mission. There are occasional ones where he's good for, but for the most part this could be used in Super United offenses. And on top of it, it can be used to counteract Madia. If you're dealing with Madia, if your guild has to deal with Madia, you don't really have Odin or really any other monster to get rid of that damage reduction. This monster can be used instead. I really wouldn't recommend it. There are better monsters out there that have better abilities that surround remove damage reduction. Odin is one of them, because on top of that, he also like buffs at least one person on the team instead of this monster. This monster doesn't really do that, but Madia uses damage reduction, and that affects use of damage overall, so your team can completely survive a full unison no matter how nasty it is, depending on what they have on top of that damage reduction that Madia casts. So this removes that and pretty much guarantees the team dead. Not all the time, but for the most part, your team's probably going, not your team, but the enemy team is probably going to die. So yeah, this is a split monster, to be fairly honest. I don't really recommend it for its ability. It can be used, but for the most part, it's not really recommended. As you see some examples I went over what's not, and it doesn't really do too much damage either. It does decent damage. 220 ability power, twice as decent damage, is not exactly the best damage in the game, nor is it really good damage. It's just damage. Okay, so moving on from there. If you are not looking for Odin, perhaps, let me show you the exclusive monsters. If you're not looking for like Wolfenheimsel, Artemida, Titania, Nihal, Pompon, or perhaps Armo, Brindleer, Cinderella, Sphinx, Galio, and Odin. If you're not looking for any of these monsters, I would stick to the other step-up spawn. This step-up spawn has way more of a gap than the regular step-up spawn they come out with, because the regular step-up spawn has 33 cost guaranteed or higher. This one's only 32 cost guaranteed or higher, and this one has 36, so it's a way wider gap, like a way wider gap. So if you know your looks bad, or perhaps you don't want those monsters, I would just recommend sticking to the other step-up spawn, because that other one has lesser of a gap, and you're guaranteed to at least get a 33. One of the best forms or ways to actually get awakening, and one of the best spawns in the game to get monsters from. Actually, I think might be the best spawn to get just straight up good monsters from. So with that being said, I hope this helped out, and I will see you in the next video. This is the AzureWrath. I'm out. Peace.